Welcome to One Man's Tracks. Today we're stepping back to the 70s to dive into an instrumental music pioneer whose music has captivated audiences for nearly 50 years now. He's the man who kick-started Virgin Records and essentially launched Richard Branson's illustrious career as an entrepreneur. That man's name is Mike Oldfield, and I've had a truly dreamy week discovering his incredible musicianship. This British multi-instrumentalist began his career playing guitar with his sister Sally in the late 60s at just age 15 after dropping out of school because his headmaster told him to cut his hair. An incredibly gifted, self-taught musician whose creativity expanded past just his blistering strings. By 1971, using just a simple tape recorder, he had managed to capture the essence of what would become his first opus that was unlike anything else coming out at the time. While visiting Richard Branson's Manor studio, he showed that tape to some of the engineers and got him a meeting with Branson, who let him live and record in the downtime when the studio wasn't being used by other artists. He gathered up as many instruments as he could muster and put together one of the most incredibly layered and engaging pieces of instrumental music I've ever heard. That is Virgin's flagship record, Tubular Bells, and I had to have a copy as soon as I had heard it. This album has become synonymous with Mike's name, spending 286 weeks charting and being the 42nd best-selling album from the UK with, I believe, over 16 million copies sold worldwide. That album has been talked about and praised ad nauseum, and so I'll stop hitting on it for the time being because that's not what I'm here to review today. I'll briefly mention his lovely follow-up that was highly criticized at the time it was released, Herget's Ridge, that was actually named after a hill that was just a short little lovely horseback ride away from where he produced and recorded this. His third album with Virgin Records, released in 1975, this is Mike Oldfield's Ommadawn. This classically inspired, magnificent orchestral album takes the listener on an unprecedented emotional journey that is even more competently composed than his previous two. He plays a total of 19 different instruments, as well as featuring a number of guest musicians who are so thoughtfully mixed in with minimal electronic effects. It's such a terrifically balanced project, with each individual instrument's importance highlighted and not overwhelming or overstaying their welcome, just coming in, adding their piece, and then fading off into the next. It's so multifaceted, and the tracks are both over 19 and 17 minutes respectively, that breaking them down in too much detail and going into each phase separately could lead to me sitting here for almost longer than the track's duration themselves, and so I think I'm going to just go through. Sure, I'll talk about some of the instruments, but only to provide some more context and give some more ideas to why the feelings I'm feeling are conveyed so effectively. If you're here to listen to a more technical analysis and breakdown of this album, I'm sorry, but I can't help you here. The opening melody feels floaty and innocent, but directionless, with an underlying element of uncertainty until the first guitar solo creeps into the mix. It climbs and builds and then cascades back down to earth like a light rain. You land in a heavenly field of harmonics that feels much more bright and steady than the melancholic undertones of the first few minutes, then reaching a beautiful, melodious plateau led by Mike's brother Terry playing the pan flute. A revelatory segment with a wonderfully light and springy tune that builds and grows in tempo and volume until once again you're up in the clouds at another natural transition point here. You stay weightless for another few bars before Mike's incredible guitars very gently bring you back down to earth once more. At this point, the drums and bass return to that uncertainty from the beginning, but allow another serene flute-led passage to intersect it before breaking into a more tribal beat. Here we also find the chanted vocal passage that gives this album its name. The word Ommadawn is a phonetic spelling of the Irish Gaelic word for fool or idiot, Ommadawn. This passage is both ominous and spiraling while simultaneously feeling hopeful and open. It quickens and becomes more dense and intense, and then it's met with the final guitar solo that is terrifying and pained, and it closes out part one. I've read that this track is him recreating the circumstances of his birth, with that final guitar solo being him exploding out of his mom's vagina. Whew, we're halfway done now and moving on to part two, who's got a more cathedral-like vastness to it, who sees return to those similar sentiments from the beginning, but with far more weight and a little slower than before. The gravity of the uncertainty and the depth of the unknown can be felt as we continue on our journey here. A slow motion internal struggle that never truly feels resolved, just more or less moved on from, to a guiltless sensation that's introduced by a beguiling bagpipe performance. They're truly magnificent and do a great job to carry me out of the darkness and into the light again. Taking the first few steps away from that guiltless sensation is difficult, but necessarily so, because the adventure beyond is always worth the struggle of finding your own path. The sky seems to be no limit at this point, with us celebrating and dancing away with a great catchy little closing number titled On Horseback. Hey, and away we go through the grass, cross the snow, big brown beastie, big brown face. I'd rather be with you than floating through space. With assistance from the Penrose kids, Mike paints a picturesque narrative where he can leave his trials and tribulations behind and just go for a ride on his horse. As is with most of these albums, it grows on me and I gain more and more appreciation for the project and the enigmatic man behind it with each listen. Oldfield's contract with Branson required another 10 albums from him, and it took him until 1990 to release his 10th, titled Amarok, which he kind of throws everything in the kitchen sink at it, and even contains a little expression of his bitterness towards Branson with a Morse code tapped out of "fuck you RB" snuck in there. He's since released 10 more albums, and honestly I haven't got much opportunity to listen to most of those other Virgin albums or his most recent stuff beyond the Tubular Bells 2 and 3 and his most recent 2017 release, Return to Ommadawn. I really don't believe that Mike's an artist that can be easily digested in just a couple of weeks, and so I'm looking forward to slowly going through his discography in a similar way that I've been approaching Tangerine Dream's immense catalog. If you're interested in some more immaculate instrumentals, check out my review of their soundtrack to the movie Thief, and maybe check out Ray Lynch's Deep Breakfast over here. Like the video if you've made it to the end here, subscribe for more secondhand throwback album reviews, and just let me know in the comments what Mike Oldfield's music means to you. Thanks ever so much for watching, and take good care, everyone.